Today we're going to discuss the power of disinformation. We're very fortunate to have four wonderful speakers who are going to take the issue of disinformation from different points of view. So we're going to start with a little bit of a academic framework, theoretical framework. So with Dr. DiCocco and then Dr. Derksham. And then we are going to move on to discuss the role of think tanks into studying and countering disinformation, and the role of governments in studying and countering disinformation with Teresa Corratella. And then I hope I can... Okay, wonderful. Okay, so as you know, disinformation has been an issue that is certainly not new, but it has intensified in the past few years. And so it is important to take it from different points of view. I see this a lot in my work. I work for the Wikimedia Foundation, which is the host organization of Wikipedia. I'm saying this, you know, if it comes up in the discussion. But now I'm going to leave the floor to our speakers, starting with Dr. DiCocco. She has to leave, unfortunately, early, so we're going to have a little bit of Q&A after her panel, after her presentation, and then the whole Q&A at the end of the whole presentation. So if you have questions, you can either stop her in the middle or ask right after. All right, Dr. DiCocco.
Do you hear me now? Yeah, I do. Okay, thank you for inviting me. This place is amazing, and I'm so glad to see so many young faces here. I'm briefly introducing myself. I am postdoctoral researcher at the European University Institute in Fiesole, and I always struggle to place me in a specific academic field. So I would say I am a computational political scientist. I usually work with text as data, and my interests span from populism to radical political actors, and I touch also some adjacent topics such as illiberalism, sovereignism, authoritarianism, and also disinformation. This is why I am here, obviously. So I brought a PowerPoint presentation, very brief, that I would like to show you because you might be, you might better catch what I am doing and what I am presenting. So I am switching there. Okay. So I struggled to find the title for this presentation because I have to sum up in 10 minutes a lot of different things at the theoretical and methodological levels. So please interrupt me if you have any urgent questions, or of course you can ask in the end. From discourse to dismissal, conspiracy language and anti-science in political communication. So there has been over the years this trend, a general trend all over the world that sees the political narratives as getting simpler and simpler. And there is this idea that politics should speak plainly, meaning that to, let's say, reduce the distance between politicians and people, politicians should speak the same language as the people, meaning that there is, according to this, let's say, idea, the need to express complex political, societal, and economic concepts in a very easy manner. This trend has been studied also at empirical level using text as data by, for example, Kenneth Benoit and his colleagues. And in general, it has been linked to what is well known in the United States as anti-intellectualism, which is the excessive degree of linguistic simplification to meet the dumbness or unintelligence of people. And this anti-intellectualism that also correlates very highly with textual simplification at the political at the political narrative level, concerns the hostility and mistrust of intellectuals and intellectualism, with usually a common expression of depreciation of education and in general the dismissal of art, of science, and everything which is connected with history. And this is considered as impractical and politically motivated. And you will see why I am making this kind of introduction. So, is speaking plainly a positive phenomenon? At the theoretical level, scholars have argued different hypotheses. On the one hand, the idea that the easier the political language, the highest the political participation among voters. I mean, people can more easily understand what politicians are talking about, so they might be triggered to exhibit, to pose, for example. On the other hand, there has been this, let's say, widespread and increasingly spread idea that, yes, it increases participation, but it reduces deliberation. I don't know how many of you are familiar with the term deliberation. So I wrote a very, let's say, simplified definition of what deliberation is, which is the process in which citizens and their representatives engage in structured, reasoned discussion to debate on public policies or societal issues. And here, Lim, in his very famous book, Anti-Intellectual Presidency, in 2008, so a long time ago, he wrote about the importance of a rational dialogue. And the problem is that simplification becomes oversimplification. And what we have noticed so far in political narrative is that there is a problem of quality and quantity. Politicians speak more, but the quality has decreased. And the political language is rich in pathos. This is Aristotle, pathos, logos, and ethos. Pathos means emotional appeals. So political language today is very rich in emotional appeals, which is a component of political language. It has always been like that since Cicero and the Roman times and the Greeks also before, but it's very poor in ethos, which is the ethical representation of speakers. So this means that politicians do not care to create an ethical image of themselves. And finally, it's very short in logos, which is the rational reasoning. What does this imply? It implies several things. For example, the fact that, like in a chicken and egg dilemma, the more politicians speak in an oversimplified manner, the lower the ability of citizens to get proper and trustworthy information about the political life in which they should not only participate, but deliberate. And there are also some hypotheses, some scholars argued, for example, that anti-intellectualism means anti-elitism, but indeed this is not the same, because some elites are by their same nature tolerated also by anti-intellectuals. And also there is another problem, which is a democratic problem, since anti-intellectualism underestimates citizens and assumes that they cannot digest anything different from inspirational platitudes and punchlines, so partisan punchlines. And partisan punchlines, for example, are responsible for a number of phenomena such as affective polarization or the lack of a structured and rational debate with the political adversary. So it is not inconsequential, like some scholars might argue in this case, because it has consequences. Rhetoric is a tool to sell policies and ideas, and maybe also to convince people about the validity of policies and ideas they will not endorse. So policy is a rhetoric is a powerful tool. And if we mix up rhetoric with oversimplification and other phenomena that can attach easily to this, then rhetoric becomes a manipulative instrument used for some specific political meaning or goals to the detriment of fair and reliable political information. And finally, the simplification feeds political ignorance, not because it's not citizens' fault if they cannot find the proper trustworthy information. It's politicians that should, like a good father, invite people to get knowledge about what they are experiencing. And so maybe also commit in a kind of choice that is responsible. And the problem is that simplification demotivates citizens to get information on politics. And we have, as a consequent effect, for example, very high abstentionism rates or partisan voting behaviors, like in Italy, that basically every 2/3 or 5 years, the party is changing, and voters who were voting for a previous party are changing party continuously. So oversimplification, and this is what I'm going to show you today, goes hand by hand with conspiracy theory and anti-science. It's also related to other stuff that we mentioned, but it's very interesting that there is a direct correlation between simplified political narratives and going anti-intellectual, for example, promoting conspiracy thinking, or at least suspicious thinking, and anti-science positions, and of course, disinformation. Because yes, disinformation can touch upon every possible field in the information sphere. In this case, I'm mostly interested in conspiracy theories and anti-science, and this is what I'm going to focus on now. For example, we have had this great opportunity of studying conspiracy theories and let's say anti-science position after the COVID-19. Some parties, for example, also moderate parties, supported no-vax positions simply because they were going through electoral campaign. And there are also other conspiracy theories that are very interesting, such as, for example, the ethnic substitution that is very fashionable in Italy nowadays, but also the EU and European Central Bank working against us. They are acting against our interests. They want us to do something in particular. And as you see, if you're familiar a bit with populism, you will see that these aspects in particular are common elements with populism, the mannequin view of the society. So the idea that society is split into two opposing groups. On the one hand, the good people, on the other hand, the corrupt elite or the corrupt people that usually corresponds to elites. It can be political, economic, or intellectual elites. But also the sense of victimhood and the ambivalence towards representative policy. What is ambivalence? Are you familiar with this? Okay, sometimes I am ambivalent toward my husband, which means that I love him and I hate him at the same time. Ambivalence is this. At a certain point, they claim, yes, we want to go with the European Union. We truly believe the European Union is our dream. And then the day after it becomes, they want us to do this. They want us to destroy, to limit our identity. They want us to dismantle what we have been doing so far. This is ambivalence. And this is basically part of my current investigation because, well, at the European University Institute, I actually work on two different fields. On the one hand, I investigate global inequalities at the textual level. And on the other hand, my personal research strand concerns everything which is connected with party narratives. And in this specific moment of my life, I was very interested in, let's say, the complexity of the political language and how it intersects or not with other aspects. This is taken, well, this is a longitudinal analysis. As you see, it covers about 10 years. This is Brothers of Italy official blog. So my unit of analysis are blogs. From the very beginning of the foundation of the party, so 2013, when basically Brothers of Italy was a niche party. It did not achieve the majority, let's say the percentage of votes needed for the party to get into the parliament. Until now, 2024, so actually this is December 2023, when Fratelli d'Italia has become a major leading party. And you will see that, for example, the complexity score. Okay, how did I, well, this is important. How did I detect the score? What I used here is ChatGPT for Mini, which means that basically I went through the theoretical aspects of these different dimensions I was interested in, and I extracted several prompts for the model to be able to answer me. I went through fine-tuning of the model and several other stuff which are basically methodological. And in the end, the model could give me back an answer, meaning it's not like a witch or a wizard. It's this is if you're familiar with large language models, you know that they are able to let's say mimic human reasoning on some aspects. And in this case, in particular, I also used what's called chain of thought, meaning that I simulated the kind of reasoning that we have to let the model learn the best option in terms of answers. And you will see, for example, that the complexity score was very, very hard for me because I started with Kenneth Benoit paper and I said, okay, what's complex? A text is complex if it has very long sentences, it uses very long words that require a higher cognitive effort. It uses, for example, many subordinates. In Italian, we love subordinates, but sometimes they can, I mean, some texts really have a lot of subordinates and other rhetorical stuff, or for example, if they use make greater use of stories and anecdotes that require a certain level of abstraction. So it's not like when Salvini says, I want to defend the Made in Italy by promoting my own recipe of tiramisu. That's not abstract, that's concrete. If you are Italian, you will probably have a knowledge of tiramisu and how it can be prepared. But it becomes abstract if I talk, for example, about brotherhood or about European Union integration. I mean, not all the people are familiar with what European Union integration might imply in our lives. Even if you go to the swimming pool that is financed using European funds, maybe you don't have a clue of what European funds are in practice. So this is an abstract concept. And you will see, for example, that anti-science looks very, very minor relative to other trends that are all decreasing, but the complexity score, which is in line with the idea that Fratelli d'Italia became a major party, and of course, it started talking a bit better. But you will see that anti-science gets higher importance if you look at anti-science per se. So you see that during the COVID pandemic, when Giorgia Meloni talked about let's say anti-vax positions and similar, she was in the midst of the electoral campaign. And there is a kind of boom in terms of what anti-science is, and then it basically disappeared. So I hope this was interesting. I'm sorry I had to sum up a lot of things, but hopefully.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Jessica. And I realize I didn't introduce you fully, but thanks for doing this yourself. Okay, so since you have to leave, I just wanted to give the opportunity to ask maximum 2 questions before. Okay, I see Yes, thank you so much. I see one in the back over there and one close here. And you can always ask questions afterwards, but just to have a chance.
Hello, my name is Andriy Chudykovsky. I'm from Global Governance. I wanted to ask you, do you think that the rise of anti-science and conspiratorial rhetoric, especially in the West, might not be caused, but more a correlation with the rise of Trumpism and the beginning of the US, the 2026 election? 2016.
Yes, let's collect the second question as well, and you can respond to both.
Thank you for the floor. Good afternoon. I'm Senchu. I'm from Gigi. My question is that since you talked about elitism and we talk about anti-science, but however, since elites are more educated or even at times overeducated, we see rise of rich people or higher social class getting more propagandized by anti-science. So how do you explain this two phenomenon? That is my question. Thank you. Have a great day.
Okay, I will start with the first question. Yes, it's a highly possible that let's say the upsurge of Trumpism in the United States has influenced what we have here in Europe, also because the leaders that appear to be let's say more inclined to make use of this kind of rhetoric are also usually very connected with that part of the US politics. There is a problem of endogeneity in this case. That is, we don't know if the cause here in Europe is because of Trump in the United States and the influence of the United States is so strong that has triggered a wave also here, or maybe it might be due to other factors. But of course, there is a correlation, a direct correlation. As for anti-elitism and anti-science, I'm not sure I got the question in the proper manner. Usually, let's say the anti-elitism collects inside this label a lot of different stuff. So there might be cases in which intellectuals are considered elite. For example, in Italy, the famous Professoroni by Matteo Salvini are a clear example of that. The question might be how, as intellectuals, we might act to reduce this distance with people who are not into, let's say, the academia or the scientific fields. And this is something that we should truly consider because we publish papers on journals that nobody reads but us. So we are in a kind of echo chamber in this case, and this is a problem. I mean, we are also contributing to this kind of ignorance, let's say, negative spillover with our way of behaving like elites. So, thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. This was so interesting. I would have so many questions on what this oversimplification does to the public square and you know, where we go from there. But I know we have limited time, so I want to turn instead to Hossein Derakhshan. He was the author of really one of the fundamental pieces of like the theorization of what disinformation, misinformation, and malinformation is, which is an information disorder document that was commissioned by the Council of Europe. He worked on this while he was at the Shorenstein Center. I'm also affiliated with the Shorenstein Center at Harvard, so great to see you here. And is now a researcher at the LSE Media and Communication Department. He is both a researcher and a practitioner. He spent years in prison over his writings on digital activism. So I'm gonna pass it on to you to tell us a little bit more about malinformation.
Grazie mille per essere venuti. Adesso devo passare all'inglese. That was all my skills now. Okay, before we get ready, because probably I have to explain a little bit why I was in prison. Maybe I can do some biographical curiosity answering. So I was the pioneer of blogging in Iran. I was born and raised in Tehran, Iran. And when I went back to Iran, because I lived in Canada when I started the whole blogging revolution, as it was called, in early 2000. How many people had a blog when you were much younger, or your people that you knew who had blogs around you? Yeah, definitely. It's not even millennial. I think it's Z generation thing. Shall we maybe switch before somebody else can take over, and then? Okay, sorry about that.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
slides are important, so I can't
Okay.
do it without.
Okay. Yes,
Sorry.
that's a great idea. Okay. All right. So we will instead turn. The idea here was to start from academia, have a little bit of a framing, and then I'll pass it on to Teresa Coratella, who is the deputy head of the ESFR Rome office, a think tank that works on these topics and foreign policy and many other things to discuss more the role of think tanks and the work on disinformation. So kind of starting to get into a middle ground between study and response to disinformation. So I'm going to pass it on to you, Teresa.
Thank you so much, Costanza. And as every year, I'm very pleased to be part of this amazing initiative, as I think that the Diplomacy Festival is really a great tool to reach out to an audience which sometimes we experts tend to ignore, namely young people. So to me, it's always a real privilege to be here and talk to you and try to explain my work. So my name is Teresa. I work in the Italian office of a pan-European think tank, which has offices in 7 capitals, European capitals, London included, and Washington. We launched our Washington office this year. What we do, we don't fight disinformation. So among our objectives, we don't have the one of fighting disinformation, but to analyze the power of disinformation. What we do research. We have several research programs. We have teams of experts based in many EU member states, but not only. Then once our research is done, we try to communicate the research we do. And then sometimes we also advocate to promote the results of our research. Why I'm mentioning this? Because all these 3 aspects are very, very important when working on disinformation as a research topic. Starting from research, we have the duty as experts to do a data-driven research in order to provide a comprehensive and real analysis of the things that happen all across the world. I mean, you are a generation that probably has to deal with a lot of things happening all around the globe. And we as experts, probably we are now in one of the most difficult, but also very interesting times for our work. We do this research with the objective of being part of the debate on a specific topic, but we also have another very, I would say, high objective to reach out to those people that really create the policies of members, of organizations, of the EU, of the multilateral order. The second important thing is about the communication of our research, and it's strictly linked to disinformation. We, among our duties, let's say, is to create space, not only to talk to policymakers and stakeholders, but also to create opportunities to have a public debate on a specific topic. I can tell you, and probably most of you in the future will work in a think tank, and the highest ambition every think tanker has is to talk to the super people, to people who know everything that is going on. Yes, it is, but at the same time, one of the, to me, at least personally, one of the most important thing in my job is also to have the occasion to speak in public, opportunities like today, to reach not only the elite. We mentioned the elite a lot of time, but the work of a think tanker, especially on disinformation, is also to talk not only to the elite. You represent a very ambitious target for think tankers, I can tell you, because you are the non-conventional audience of our research. When we do a research, we go to the parliament, we go to the MFA, we meet diplomats from the Prime Minister office, other colleagues working in this field, and talking to them, I can assure you, is much easier than talking to an audience like yours. Why that? Because you are the future journalists, you are the future members of the parliament, professors, doctors. I mean, whatever you will choose to do. I mean, it's during these times, very difficult times, challenging times, talking to an audience like yours, trying to explain what disinformation is, especially in a country like Italy, I can tell you that sometimes represent quite of a big challenge. I mean, disinformation is of very recent times, also in the think tank community in Italy. I'm sure that you know how many think tanks are in Italy, and you know that we are very few if compared to other member states, without mentioning even the US. I mean, the US, it's a completely different world when we talk about think tanking, because probably think tanking was born there. So, and in Italy, there is a good group of people working in this field. You will find great experts on a lot of topics, but on disinformation is really of recent times for many different reasons. And this will lead me to the last part of my presentation, why sometimes it's difficult to talk about disinformation and do research on disinformation in Italy. The first difficulty is, of course, as I said, the very small group of think tankers working on this topic. Competition is also a very, I'm sorry to say that, but sometimes competition drives our work on disinformation. Why? Because of the lack of funding to work on disinformation. There are a lot of EU grants. For example, the EU is a master on funding disinformation work for think tankers, but it's a very difficult, process. And once you access, you can do really a good job, but it's also not so easy to access to EU funding, while the national funding, especially the public one, sometimes is very limited. So competition is one problem, lack of funding is the other one. I will leave the most difficult challenge at the end, also as anticipated by Jessica during her presentation. Why is also so difficult? Because disinformation is a very difficult phenomenon to map and to do research on. You experienced fully what it means to receive fake information, to read fake news, misleading news during the COVID pandemic. Probably you, more than us, know what it means. And this was just one of the main dimension of disinformation. It's a very chameleonic phenomenon, which changes the color depending on the situation, depending on what is happening. You all read, I hope, about today's election in Moldova, about the results, about how difficult these elections were, not only for the future of the country, but also because there was really a huge democratic problem with those elections. It's very easy to disrupt. It's very easy to influence elections, to influence reliable data, reliable information. So you can see that on a daily basis, we are fully and completely, sorry if I use this word, attacked by disinformation campaigns, tactics. And the more we go into these very difficult times, it will be more and more easy for external actors to have a say and to try to influence our democratic processes. Another, link to that, it's a big challenge for think tanks is to have access to data also, to do research, to do data-driven research. It's very expensive sometimes to get these data. You need to ask companies, private companies that can provide you of this, and because of the above mentioned reason, the lack of funding, sometimes it's quite difficult to access the data which allows you to do a data-driven research. And the last and more difficult challenge to do research on this information is the political landscape. Jessica mentioned the recurring elections that some countries in Europe are facing. Elections mean, on one side, the most perfect fulfillment of democracy, but on the other side, elections, especially like in some countries, they create also economic instability, social instability, because citizens become very tired. And the fatigue, the democratic fatigue, can become really a very dangerous, not a dangerous element, but the democratic fatigue sometimes perfectly create the opportunity for external interference, disinformation, or however you want to call it. So the political instability is really a complicated phenomenon to deal with when you want to work on disinformation, because sometimes political leaders are the main drivers of I would say not disinformation, but rather misinformation. We, on a daily basis, I'm sure that many of you on a daily basis, not all days, I hope so, but without knowing that, we are daily drivers of misinformation. We share sometimes data which are not accurate because we like that content, we like the opinion shared by that specific person. We're human beings. This is why disinformation can find easy victims, because we are human beings, and this is what happens also in the political landscape. So if I can conclude, if you would like to work on a think tank on the topic of disinformation, it will be very exciting, but at the same time, very difficult. But I would strongly encourage many of you to work on that, because probably you don't hear that much during your university exams, but disinformation today is a threat, is a concrete threat, very tangible at the end. The effects of disinformation are very tangible. So the more people are interested in contribute to this kind of debate and do research of that, the better it is.
Thank you, Teresa. And that was a really interesting description also of like what we can do, what the people in this room can decide to do in their careers. I think we have, solved our technical problems. So back to Hossein. Let's try to keep it to the 10 minutes or so, because I want to make sure we have time for questions.
Yes. Okay, excellent. Thanks again. So I'm going to focus on one concept that I developed in that now famous information disorder report, and that is malinformation. And I give you a definition of what it is. But then before that, if people haven't seen that's the outline today. If people haven't seen the information disorder sort of diagram, this is the report co-authored by Claire Wardle, my friend. This is the famous Venn diagram that has three categories. Both, I mean, I call it disinformation, information disorder, or you can also call it bad information in a sense. So it's made up of three possibilities of mixing falseness and intent to harm. When someone intends to harm another person, reputation, election loss, the idea of harm in a very general sense, not necessarily physical harm. So you have misinformation, which is false information without intention to harm anyone or to damage anyone. You have disinformation, which is both falseness and intent to harm someone. And then malinformation, which is the category I'm going to expand on today, which is actually counterintuitive because it's correct information, but with the intention to harm someone. And the best example that clarifies the whole category for everyone, I think, in this room or outside, is revenge porn. Revenge pornography is the best example of how truthful, accurate information can be used against someone. So, to summarize that report, I mean, the argument, I don't have that much time to get into it, but it has three elements and three phases. So this creates, I mean, in a more applied way, but because this is a very theoretical, conceptual kind of presentation. In a more applied way, I've been suggesting that people should study it in terms of who is trying to manipulate whom or harm whom. And based on this, when you have the state and non-state and public as actors or as agents of disinformation, you have 9 possibilities, which obviously I can't get into, but it's not always the case that, for example, disinformation is done by governments against the public in another country. Sometimes they do it to their own people, to their own populations. There are examples here, and then some of them actually have names already. So, for example, propaganda, the term propaganda is always when a state tries to manipulate another public. But then this argument shows how the most vulnerable group of people to be targeted would be the non-state actors and agents, which I would love to expand maybe in another time and chance, because I want to focus on the future of information warfare with these 9 possibilities. I would say, my argument is that the future, which is already happening now, it's actually not as scary because of the disinformation itself, but malinformation. Because malinformation is much easier to make, it's quicker, and it's more confusing as well. It's so difficult to detect. I'll get into it. So going back to this model, malinformation is the right side, and it's deliberate publication of private information for personal, corporate, rather than public interests, such as revenge porn, deliberate change of context, date and time, and of genuine content. So remember the word context. And if you're familiar with the idea of thick description as a method in anthropology, have you heard of the method of thick description? How many people have heard of it? So it's a very well-known method in anthropology which means descriptions of things, of what people do or the surrounding in a really, really detailed way with lots of context. So the key word here is the context, because malinformation is always correct, genuine information whose context has been manipulated. So I open up the possibilities of what kinds of contexts are usually manipulated that make up this really important category of malinformation. So time is easy. People change pictures, time stamp, for example, 10 years ago, they pretend as if it was yesterday. Then there's also the temporal order of things. So editing, in a way, is a kind of temporal tempering, temporal manipulation. Then you have the space. Not only the location of a video, for example, and people can pretend that this happened in Syria, whereas it happened in a long time ago in another country, for example. But then cropping is also a spatial manipulation. So when people crop part of a picture, or actually when people crop or select a quote from somebody else's longer interview or quote, that is also a spatial manipulation, which is really important. Then you have the domain, the legal domain. The revenge porn is the best example, when you change something that is private, but it's obviously genuine and factual, and you take it outside to the public domain. Two growing forms and categories of malinformation are important. One is linked to the agent of malinformation, to the person who's done it. So it's very common that politicians especially take a genuine picture of a scandal that they were involved in, and then they pretend it was generated by AI, or they say this was photoshopped. This is a really growing and useful category of malinformation to study with this sort of conceptual model. And then proportion. Proportion is linked to scientific stuff a lot. Unfortunately, Jessica left. It's really relevant to the point she was making about science, because much of the malinformation about science is about concealing or hiding the proportion of something. So, for example, we know that 3-4 people have died out after having taking a vaccine, for example. But then 3-4 people out of 10 million is very different from 3-4 people without giving people the context. So it's true, 3-4 people have died, but out of how many? This is also a very, very important category of malinformation. So I don't think I have to explain why it's so dangerous, and I argue more dangerous than disinformation, which is completely fabricated. You can easily imagine how easy people have, not necessarily in every category or every type of picture, but I think gradually we are all becoming much more familiar with the potentials and the powers of generative AI. How many people in this room have created one generative AI picture in the past year? So see, I think the more we use them, the more we learn how everything's possible in them. So the more suspicious we become of everything we see, and I think it's a good thing. So we know how somehow to detect completely fabricated stuff, but then when people change the context, it's really, really difficult, not just to detect, but also to stop and to debunk. So more examples here. Doxing, if you're familiar, is a kind of malinformation. Many leaks are always malinformation. Sometimes leaks are for the public interest, and that's why they're justified. Selective quotes, as I said, photo cropping, audio editing. This is a growing category as well, because you can't say, this person has not said these things, but they've changed the temporal order in an audio clip. And then a category which is really evil, and I think more and more countries do that, and I just briefly mention it. It happened in Saudi Arabia when Khashoggi was killed at the embassy, and someone wore his clothes and went out of the embassy trying to manipulate the police and the intelligence. It didn't work out because it was a very terribly done thing. But then something happened during the protest a few years ago in Iran. A young woman who was already killed in the street by the police. They made this video, which I still don't know how they made it, because it looks very realistic, but it could be a double who has played this CCTV, showing that so this video showed on Iranian television, it showed that the time when she was actually dead already, they showed this to manipulate the public, saying that she was still alive, and this is the footage, and then she threw herself off the roof afterwards without any logical explanation. And they showed it, and I think many people, at least they started to have doubts about what exactly had happened. So they tried to change the narrative by either fabricating a complete CCTV footage, and I think this is a really dangerous, evil thing to do, because CCTV footages are always trusted by everyone. I don't know why, but it's one of the epitomes of trustworthiness and factuality. Or they just change the timestamp on top. If they only change the timestamp, this would be malinformation. But if it's completely staged and directed by an actor, then it would be disinformation. If you want to know more about this case, I've written on it in Wired magazine in that article. So conclusion is that non-state organizations are usually much more easily targeted, and they are more important to protect. And then malinformation is more dangerous than disinformation. And that's why I call them thick fakes, because it deals with context the way that thick description in anthropology deals with contexts. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Hussein. I cannot overstate how seminal that report was. I've been working on disinformation for a while, and I think I've used that first slide in every single one of my presentations, and get really upset because people still don't use those definitions. You have to use those definitions. So thank you so much. And this was incredibly interesting. I just want to add something from the point of view of Wikipedia. We have communities editing Wikipedia, and one of the issues they face is really about malinformation in front of doxing. Right. In many cases, it is important, especially in some countries, that the editors are, have their privacy respected. And in cases of doxing are really, really dangerous. In case, for example, in which their private addresses or names are revealed, they could be prosecuted. And so we had some cases like that. So I agree that the focus on malinformation is really important and underestimated. Now I want to pass it on Katarina Zaran, which I'm sure my pronunciation is not good enough, but apologies. Because she is the Deputy Director of the Department for Strategic Communication and Countering Foreign Disinformation of the Polish Ministry of Foreign Affairs. And so very, very important perspective to give us a sense of what countries are doing. And Poland in particular has been really at the forefront of thinking about how to counter disinformation and how to make the information ecosystem more trustworthy in general. And so after we had discussed a little bit the theoretical and the general threat, what can governments do concretely, and what are they doing concretely to counter this? You.
Thank you very much for the introduction. Thank you very much for the invitation. And I'm really happy to be here and see such an amazing audience listening to what we work on a daily basis. So in contrast to my amazing speakers, I do fight disinformation on a daily basis. So I and my team at the MFA in Poland, we fight, it's not only disinformation, we call it foreign information manipulation and interference, which is a combination probably of malinformation and disinformation that you were really clearly distinguishing how you treat it from an academic perspective. But on the battlefield, and that battlefield, I mean the infosphere right now, because you need to know that we are at the same time fighting Russian and Chinese in war in the information space. And it's not only about war in Ukraine, but it's happening globally. So we as states on every day, we see the narratives, we learn from you. We learn from think tanks, we learn from academia about how to distinguish the narratives, how to find the sources of the information, and how to successfully and effectively tackle that. So we are heading basically to a situation which is very close, and all the experts tell me that one day, and it's going to be soon, people will not be able to differentiate between what's truth and what's not. And this is scary. Imagine that you read your news in the morning and you have no idea if it's true or not. Can you believe it or not? So where is the real source of my information when I drink my cup of coffee in the morning? Is it what I see, a deep fake, or is it real? Is it AI generated, or is it trustworthy information for a big news outlet? So what's the intention of our adversaries right now? They fight for your minds. They really want to change your perspective every day. They really want you to be confused. Their aim is to polarize us, not to know what to believe in, not to know what to think about any issue. Should I vaccinate myself or not? Will it protect me or not? Or you can think about, should I support Ukraine in their fight for freedom? or it's a really Nazi country with bad people there and Russians should kill them all. And at some point, we will get to the situation, if we don't counter it effectively, that we had no clue. We have no clue. And I think that perspective shows you the real threat we're facing right now and why we need to tackle that, why we need to study it, why we need to understand that the source of information is super important, and don't be deceived, hashtag. Definitely what our adversaries do, they want to not only misinform and disinform you, malinform you. One of the operations that's been held, for example, is known for the name doppelganger. So what they reproduced all the media outlets with a little tweak change in the name or some changes, so they're not, so when you read your newspapers in the morning online, because how many of you read newspapers in a paper? No one, exactly. Okay. Congratulations, you're one of the, we're the only one in the room. But it's not funny, so it's easier. When you have the paper, you know where it's from. You buy it in the market, in a shop or anywhere. But when you read online, you need to double check or triple check what you're reading, especially when it comes from your social media accounts. When you do not, how many of you enter in the search engine the name of the news outlets you want to read? Okay, good, right? That's okay, but it's still not enough. So if you take your social media and you just click, and it looks like The Guardian, La Stampa, La Repubblica, it looks like your very well-known paper, but it's not, because they changed just a little bit in the name or in the graphics, and you read something that is just not true, but you believe it because they used the very well-known, trusted logo of a news outlet, and you're familiar with, and your parents have been reading this. So definitely there are many attempts to trick us, and it's happening all the time and everywhere. So so my points right now is, for example, in the ministry, we work to build trust to government communications, to build alliances with think tanks, media, to train media all over the world, how to tackle that challenge, how to not to be tricked by our adversaries. We work with Ministry of Education on media and digital literacy, so that new generations like yourselves and younger generation know how to read the news, because we live nowadays in a situation that we don't know how to read the news, if it's fake or not. So definitely there needs to be an awareness among ourselves, and we need to be able to distinguish between what's truth and what's not, and what's worth trusting in. So in our government is taking this threat very seriously right now. We have set up a new unit at the MFA. We call it Stratcom unit, but it's a Department for Countering Foreign Disinformation and Strategic Communication, because it's all combined. The way we want to tackle the lies that are thrown at us every day, we just need to feed the audiences with real information. So it would be great if everyone in the world trusted government communications instead of social media information. Unfortunately, it's not happening, but we need to work constantly to rebuild that trust and to make the sources of information, those reliable, the first point for all of you to go to once you seek for trusted information. So one day when you read about whether it's worth vaccinating or not, I would rather go for a government website and check what are pros and cons for that, rather than search Google and find information from some really weird websites that are everywhere, and they are multiplied right now all over the place. So I will give you one example how this threat is dangerous and why we take steps to counter it effectively. For example, recently we had floods in Poland, in the southern part of Poland, and as you probably know, Poland was one of the first countries to help Ukrainians after the invasion of Russia, who welcomed people to their own houses, and of course it's been a big effort for the whole country to help Ukrainians live their lives there in Warsaw and other parts of Poland. And our adversaries try to heat up the conversation around this help to polarize the society. And one of the narratives that are constantly flowing around Polish infosphere is that there is no point of supporting Ukraine anymore. We should not be doing. They're stealing our jobs. Those kids are taking seats in our classes at schools. We should stop helping them. Of course, if we stop helping Ukraine, Putin will win. Everyone knows. So that kind of narratives pop up all the time. And imagine that even during our floods in the southern Poland, the disinformation narratives popping instantly were like, oh, no one's helping those poor people who lost their houses, but everyone's helping Ukraine. So is it a natural debate, or it's not? We of course know it's not. It's a foreign information manipulation. They even put on some maps once they were fabricating the memes or one of the weapons in this battlefield. They were putting map of Poland and a stamp of Ukraine in the south of Poland. When it's Ukraine, everyone helps them. If it's not Ukraine, no one helps them. So this kind of techniques and tactics are very common right now. But imagine like 2 weeks later, we had a hurricane in the US. And also in the parts of the map in the US, you could see the same stamps. Oh, it's Ukraine. They help Ukraine, but they don't help you once you lost your house. So you can see that those patterns go worldwide. And if those patterns go worldwide, it means someone has an intentional will to disrupt conversations in the society, to build distrust to the governments, to polarize the society that is then anti-governmental or is not trusting government communication. So these are a whole bunch of techniques that are happening right now in the infosphere. The aim is very clear for them. They really want. It's easier to change governments ahead of elections, for example. Everyone's watching Moldova right now, and we see that that there is like we're on the edge of disbelieving and not trusting European Union there. Yeah. So, and it's not like, you know, they don't want to live in peace. They do, but in the news they read so many different narratives that they don't know exactly what to believe in the end. So I just want to see one day, like you guys, you are more aware of what's happening in the infosphere. When you read your news, you know what you read, and when you share the information you're interested in, you really check what you're sharing. Because most, as my colleagues here told you, most of us do it not intentionally, but somehow the adversaries use us to spread that disinformation or malinformation around the world. And we're just helping bad people doing this. So I just want you to know that, you know, this is a battlefield and you don't want to be used. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I couldn't have imagined a better closing sentence for this panel. We don't have a lot of time, but I really want to open it for questions. So thank you so much. I see one here. Let's collect 3 questions and then do another round. So I see one question here, one here, and then that, yes.
Okay, nice to meet you. My name is Flaminia Faor, and I'm also for global governance. I wanted to ask, today the political sphere increasingly turns to social media to share messages with a wider audience. And these trends sometimes leave me conflicted because on one hand, I understand the need to involve people in the political process because we have a problem with apathy and with disinterest. And so to engage more and more people to create a democratic system. But on the other hand, I often find that the content being shared is not only oversimplified and populist, as the professor previously mentioned it, but sometimes it also seems, in my opinion, of course, inappropriate given the official and institutional roles of these people involved. So I don't know if this reflects a lack of professionalism and how can I say, like austerity, like gravitas. But sometimes it kind of resembles the behaviors of influencer on platforms like TikTok or Instagram, like a 30-second or sometimes 1-minute video before election. It is appropriate. So I wanted to ask my final question. I'm sorry it was so long. What is the appropriate approach for balancing the realm of politics, institution, and social media, especially the new ones that are really popular between young people? Thank you so much.
Good afternoon, I'm Sara De Felice, also a GG2 student. And first of all, I would like to thank all the speakers for the spread of awareness among us. And then I would kindly ask to each speaker if they would provide us concrete advice in order to divulgate the notions that you have been giving us today. Thank you.
The last.
Good afternoon. My name is Francesco Alessandrini. I'm from Global Governance. And I just wanted to make a question linking to a sentence of Umberto Eco, which states, social media gives legions of idiots the right to speak when they only spoke at a bar after a glass of wine without harming the community. So my question is, and it's referred to anyone of you that would like to answer, do you personally think that the spread of fast consumption of information, over-information, and misinformation could fuel the weakening of democratic process, empowering people's capacity to speak with a fake sense of knowledge?
Thank you. Could you repeat just your question? Because okay, thank you so much. Do you want to take it, Teresa? I'll maybe give all of you an opportunity to respond.
Okay, thank you so much for these very interesting and difficult questions. On the appropriate approach, unfortunately, I don't have the answers to that because times changes so quickly. And if I think about myself, was at the university at your age, the only way to get the view, for example, of a politician was to watch the news, read the printed newspaper, or wait for that politician to say something at the Chamber of Deputies. That was our only way to get the information, which was a slower process, not like today. I feel really, I mean, your pain in your question, because I remember that before the latest political election, all politicians were on TikTok. They were talking to the younger audience like they were making a show, because sometimes this is also an issue that we tend to make shows instead of saying concrete things. So I really feel you, because I mean, I'm not young as you, but I also felt very, I mean, I didn't like that at all because they were talking to you like they were talking to, I mean, babies, which you are not. So yeah, there is no inappropriate approach. It should be based on critical capacity to judge ourselves when we do communication about things which it lacks today. So no, there is no appropriate. What I would like to say is that data-driven thinking should be the main driver of what we say publicly. I mean, on some examples, unfortunately, the last, I mean, one of the things that I still keep in my mind was after the Bucha massacre. I mean, what was said, what was written on X, Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram will always remain in our mind as one of the worst and really lowest level of doing disinformation, because I'm sorry, I mean, some of those people did a real disinformation. So unfortunately, consider the times we live in, that was one of the things personally I will never forget in my life. And unfortunately, more and more, we see more and more today. On your question, yeah, this is democracy. I mean, everybody can have a say. Everybody can say whatever they want. Our duty as citizens should be to then be able to reply to the false things that are said and false judgment in a constructive, always open and information-based way. We as citizens, this is the only way we have, I mean, to counterbalance this kind of, but we can do that only if we get informed. And it's very difficult today to also receive a daily information system. You know, the media world is in a deep crisis. I was still privileged I could read the newspapers on a daily basis. Now I understand that it's not the same. It's not the same anymore. And these are one of the effects of the modern times we live in.
Thank you. Thank you, Teresa.
Yes, thank you for all the questions. They are very straight to the point of our conversation today. So in terms of like media consuming and how we communicate with different audiences, I'm a great fan of communications. But if you communicate anything, you first need to think about your audience. Who is your audience? And you differently communicate to elderly people, different communicate to special groups of, you know, engineers or think tankers or journalists. And in a different way, you communicate with younger audiences. So we at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs right now, we experiment all those various levels of information and communicating with the audiences. We also try to reach the younger audiences, but if you want to engage properly with the younger audience, you need to engage younger people to do this. So it's never the politicians who would be now TikTokers, which is not genuine. You need to be natural. You need to be straight to the point, but also genuine in what you're talking about. So definitely that's the best approach. And in your case, if you want to engage in the conversation about politics or environment or any case that you're interested in, just do it the way you feel it, but rely on resources that are trustworthy, that are evidence-based, and use your critical thinking in it. So once you combine different information from different places, you just, in the end, it is your brain, and you are still much better than AI. still much better than AI in thinking critically about some issues. Just use your critical thinking and then process that and share the information you feel it's resonating with your audience. One more thing in terms of how social media work and how disinformation is injected in our social media field. These are mainly information with a lot of emotions. So what our adversaries are doing right now, they use a lot of emotional content. So once you scroll your feed and you see like breaking news, this is super important, she killed someone or he harmed someone else, just don't read only the leads. Deep in the article, you will then find the real explanation, if there is an article, of course. But you need to read more, not just the click bites, as they call it, but deeply in, try to read more than just 2 sentences. And usually you will find the whole explanation there, which is not necessarily in the title of the article, because it has to be catchy, it has to be emotional. Try to search for another source of information just to confirm, like journalists, like investigative journalism. They cannot rely on just one resource. So, and source of information, yes. And what was the last question in terms of?
The one on Echo and social media.
Social media is for everyone. Everyone should be using it. It opened our the whole sphere of information. I remember those times when only journalists were able to communicate with audiences, or only politicians. Now everyone can be a journalist in a way. Everyone can be a source of information. You are, you know, you have your own social media. You're on the spot. You take a picture and then you post it, and it's online, and everyone can see it. It's a revolution in an infosphere. That's why it's now being used as a tool for the battlefield, as I said. But we cannot ban it. We cannot stop people from using it. We only can ask for critical thinking, and that's it. It's a lot, but that's it. Thanks.
Okay, thanks for giving me the final minutes. I forgot to thank the organizers, Mr. Bartolomucci, who invited me, and then it was a generous invitation, but then I also had some troubles getting here, so thank you. And his son is here, so I'm thanking him on his behalf to get me to Rome. Then I have a few points to make, which are important. One is that I think, you know, now that we can't really find or help people discover the most trusted sources of information, I personally think a general skepticism, which is critical thinking, is much less risky than asking people to discover these, you know, mountains of truths. Because these mountains of truths also themselves make mistakes. There are so many mistakes that the New York Times has done. Some of it has been deliberate, the way they manipulated information to attack the war in Iraq, and some more recent stuff about the Palestinian war. This was, some of it is deliberate, and we can't ignore that many of these organizations do that too. It's not just Russia or China, unfortunately, or Iran. Then another point, to study disinformation, we still haven't had time to look at it as a long-term process. It's a process. It's not a moment. It's not a thing. It's a long-term process of being exposed to different kinds of narratives, and then gradually people be swayed to a direction. So to study it, I haven't seen longitudinal research, for example, as much, because a research that takes 5 years to study people who, for example, switched from being, liberal progressive to far right. So if we haven't seen the longitudinal research, then how do we even tackle some of these things in a long-term way as well? Because tackling them, I think, would require some long-term strategies. And then a very, very, I think, dangerous category which will emerge. This is my Black Mirror mindset, is the disinformation applied to history. And you know why? Because those people are all dead. So if you add someone to an historical document, to a picture, nobody can verify it. So I think this is a really threatening thing, and I guess we have to think and write about it. And the last point, which I just said, is that, I mean, a critical take on this whole topic, because I presented a theoretical conceptual presentation, but then there is a growing critique of the whole discourse and the whole debate, and I sympathize with some of it, because, for example, some of the stuff that we are so worried about, rightly so, I would say, because we adhere to democracy and democratic processes and principles, is that for the first time, maybe in history, or maybe in contemporary history, other powers are also able to wage information warfare against the West. So of course the West is panicked, but it's something that they've always been doing during the Cold War, before that, and they still continue doing to this very day to many other nations in the world. So it's a general contest in a way of information, and that's why I think the word information warfare is actually a realistic approach to it.
Thank you so much. This is a great closing. Thank you to all of the panelists. This was a fantastic conversation. Thank you to the Festival della Diplomazia for always organizing such interesting conversations. Thanks to you for participating and for your questions. I'll end on a personal note. I've been in this room before, but never raised my eyes to look at this beautiful painting. So don't forget to do that. It's really amazing. So thank you so much, everyone. Have a fantastic rest of your day and the festival.